if that's okay. Good afternoon. This is the May 22nd, 2024 Land Use Committee meeting. I'll ask everybody to go around and identify themselves. I'm Jay Rosapepe, the Chair, City Council.
Eric Warden, City Council.
Scott Diener, Councilmember 3, Port Orchard.
We have sorry, Nick and Jim.
Nick Bond,
Apologize.
Community Development Director.
Jim Fisk, Principal Planner.
Okay, we have a published agenda. Is there any additions to the agenda at this time? All right, let's kick it off then with non-conforming uses and structures.
Okay, so last meeting we had a discussion here about non-conforming uses and structures, and I think it was initiated by one particular property owner, but the committee asked us to investigate a code amendment to allow one-time expansion of non-conforming use. So first thing we did is we collected all the applicable non-conforming codes from all the jurisdictions on the peninsula. We also looked at Tacoma, Federal Way, and Puyallup to kind of see what everybody else is doing. So we included all of that in your packet as a whole, but then we took another step and we created a matrix so that you could see how our code aligns with other jurisdictions' codes. So that's the first sheet essentially in your packet, is this matrix. And on that matrix, you'll find that our code and the way we approach non-conforming uses is consistent with pretty much all of the jurisdictions. In fact, none of the jurisdictions allow for the expansion of a non-conforming use. You can expand a non-conforming structure, but typically when you do that, and we are the same, if you're going to expand a non-conforming structure, it has to be in full compliance with the code. So let's say you had a building that was in the side yard setback, it encroached 2 feet into it. If you were going to put an addition on the back of the house, well, that addition would have to be at least 5 feet from that side property line. So that's consistent with all of the jurisdictions. So we wanted to bring that to your attention and get a little bit more direction. Do we want to go down this path of creating an exemption for the expansion of non-conforming uses? And really that one particular case, it is a non-conforming use. It's not a non-conforming structure. The remedy, there's a couple different remedies, right? It's either to redevelop the property to a use that is conforming, or you can petition the city to redesignate the zoning of the property to make it a conforming use. And this has been done by a few property owners in the city where they have a non-conforming use and the lender would not lend on the property because it was non-conforming. And so even though if we go down the path of creating a one-time expansion of 10%, I suppose we'd have to set a time, like an effective date of that, you know, whatever that is, but also too, it doesn't remedy the problem long-term. So they could redesignate the property to a zone that use is conforming. So we just want to get a little bit more direction. Is this something that you would like us to pursue? And if so, I think perhaps it would probably be best rolled into our updates associated with the comp plan update.
I would just add too that I think if we were going to go down that road, I would want to get some legal advice on it as well, and just hear from the attorney about whether it makes sense to create this type of process versus simply telling people that they need to apply for a rezone or a comprehensive plan designation. So I think if the committee wants to continue looking at this, the next step would be to send this to the attorney for some guidance.
Scott, would you like to weigh in first?
Yeah, sure. I think it's worth looking at. I think I understand the use expansion concerns quite clearly, but in terms of structures, I think we should allow for what would be, in my mind, a reasonable expansion of up to 10%, subject to all current standards in effect for the zone.
So just for clarification, we currently allow non-conforming structures to expand, right? That's okay, provided that they expand in conformance with the code. Problem is, well, the use, any expansion, whether that be upward or outward, that is an expansion of the use. So,
Remind me, we're talking about a residential use in a
well,
commercial zone,
I
is
mean,
that right?
I think we're talking about all of them.
No, but what prompted this?
What prompted this was a property owner who has a detached house in an R4 district. The detached house is not a permitted building type, nor is it a permitted use for the single family residential.
Okay. Well, then I think since we're talking about use, we probably need to get the attorney to weigh in on that.
Eric,
And we're not discussing a one-time exemption. We're talking about, or we are talking about a one-time exemption currently. Is that what we're doing?
It could be, depending on if we set bookends on what that expansion could look like. Say
I don't think we do
10% of the
one-time
footprint.
exemptions. We're looking at modifying our code, because we can't do this for one person and not do it for the
Right,
next.
right.
I
And
think that's a slippery slope.
yeah, I think all of this is a slippery slope, but I'll let the attorney give us advice.
Okay, so right now what I'm hearing is that we're requesting additional information from our attorney, but we're not ready to move forward with a decision to bring it to the council at this point. Is that clear enough, Jim and Nick?
I think so.
Okay,
And I just for the specific, the origin of this request, I don't remember if the last meeting we talked about the history of the zoning on that property, but we did go back and check, and this was not a recent zoning change. I believe that had been zoned for high density residential going back many, many years. And so it's not any code changes that we've made in the last decade that have created the nonconformity. It's that whole block was zoned R20, which was our high density residential previously, which also had did not allow for single family homes going back, I think, into the early 2000s.
I think we've been fairly consistent, and Scott, since you were the chair last time, in the fact that, and please, Jim and Nick weigh in along with the mayor. This is for Eric's benefit, that we try to avoid one-offs. In other words, if we're making a decision and moving it forward, what we do for one, we're going to do for all in the city. Go ahead, Eric.
I thought that last time we talked, we were considering the 10%, as long as they met setbacks and all that, all those requirements, that we're gonna be more open to those. I didn't realize it was a one-off, a one-time exemption for somebody.
And that's why we're looking at getting some legal advice here, because of looking at going it, that we would be doing it for everybody, not just for this one individual.
I think and Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what I heard is that when you're looking at non-conforming structures, that's one thing, but when you're looking at an expansion of non-conforming uses, that's another. And there's case law that has been developed around expansion or intensification of non-conforming uses, and we probably need to hear legal weigh in on that. For my part, housing has become kind of a critical issue, not just here, but everywhere. And I would like to see us, if we have some flexibility, to allow for, let's say, a 10% expansion. I get what the comp plan and redesignations of zones is intended to do. It's intended to kind of make those non-conforming uses go away over time, but we're also in unprecedented times. So if there is some flexibility, I'd like to see it.
It's not easy adding 10% onto your home financially these days. I think if someone was to do it, it would be definitely a need. But
It's not easy in terms of what?
cost, contractors, materials, all of it, it's a lot. So, but again, I'm not a fan. I was telling Scott last night in a conversation, I'm a fan of consistency, and yeah, so the one-off thing, I'd like to hear the legal's opinion on that.
I mean, we don't know why these expansions might occur, but it might occur
Yep.
because parents or kids can't find another place to rent. It's not affordable. And so I don't want to
Absolutely.
beat that up, but I'd like us to see if we've got some flexibility.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we need to know the reason that they're doing this.
No, we don't.
No, I mean,
I'm just saying,
we
let
don't want to get in that
somebody-
business.
No, we
No,
don't.
it's just a conversation piece. It's
Okay, anything else to add to this one? Okay, item 2, please. Middle Housing Comprehensive Plan Policy Analysis.
Okay, so as you may recall, the city received a grant for middle housing implementation for House Bill 1110 last fall, I believe it was, and so we brought a memorandum with several alternatives to the Land Use Committee and the work study meeting in April, identifying some of the alternatives to comply with House Bill 1110. As part of our grant agreement with the Department of Commerce, we have deliverables due by June 15th. One of them is that middle housing memo that you all have reviewed. The other part of that is an analysis of our draft comprehensive plan elements, specifically the land use, capital facilities, and housing elements, and the policies in those draft elements, identifying any barriers to middle housing construction. So since the last land use committee meeting, we've gone through and looked at all of these drafts and pulled out the ones that could potentially be barriers. And so that analysis is provided in your packet. To be honest, many of the policies that we've identified as potential barriers aren't really barriers at all. And I think you can see that in the analysis. We really had to work hard to find things that might fit this requirement for commerce. And so while some things may initially seem like, they could be a barrier, let's say like the wildfire urban interface, requiring that additional setback and things like that might be a barrier to middle housing development because of additional lands being used for some other purpose. But the land being used for another purpose is, there's a component to that, climate, critical areas, those sorts of things. So if they don't really end up being barriers. The only thing that potentially could be, and it's in this analysis, is the policy where development pays for development. And that would require, a pretty significant shift in the way we operate. But that's really the only thing that could potentially be a barrier to middle housing. So we wanted to get this in front of you for some discussion, and then we can take your feedback and incorporate it into this analysis. But we'd like to get this to the Department of Commerce next month so we can fulfill our this fiscal year's obligations.
And just to add on to what Jim said here, I think that this exercise of looking at our policy and identifying barriers is really geared as a task towards cities that have areas that are strictly single family. And so we filled out this grant application in a pretty expedited manner, and got some help from one of our consultants that was helping another client that I think had significant barriers to housing. And so it sounded like a great idea at the time to look at our policies to figure out where the barriers were, but we really had a hard time finding them because we do a pretty good job already of allowing middle housing. And so this is really just a box that we have to check. And on the cost of development, we're not recommending any changes. you know, I've been looking at doing some development here in Tacoma, and it's shocking how little Tacoma charges of new development. And their approach is that they put the cost of everything on the ratepayers, and the ratepayers are essentially subsidizing new development. I don't think that's a direction that we want to go, but certainly those costs do represent a barrier to building new housing. Although with the amount of housing that you're seeing in Port Orchard, it doesn't seem to be a very big barrier, at least at this time and in this economic setting.
Comments?
I think there's,
Questions?
I
I
think
don't
there's,
have any.
yeah, I think there's growth in my conversations with folks out there. We can't win. The developers think we're charging them too much, yet our activity really hasn't slowed down. And there's development fatigue in our community, from traffic to, and for us to make a policy change to start charging, having the ratepayers pay for the infrastructure to fuel additional growth, I would struggle with that. But you guys are the policymakers.
I agree with Mayor Rob. I would very much struggle with that.
I agree
I
with
have
that.
no additional comments on that one. Scott?
No,
All right.
Just so you all know, that's great news. So we can get this to Commerce next month, but next year we have some additional work to do. Looking at our code for barriers there. We're gonna have to do a workshop. So this process isn't over, and there will be some opportunity for public input as well.
And when you say next year, you mean next state fiscal year, which starts in July, right?
Correct. Next fiscal year.
Third topic, Bethel sub-area plan.
Yeah, so I'm going to tackle these ones, and I know that your packet was pretty thick in terms of including a lot of new information. As part of our 2024 comprehensive plan update, we had identified scope for our consultant to help us develop sub-area plans for both of our centers on the Bethel corridor. And so the reason to develop the sub-area plan here, the primary reason, is because centers are score more favorably when you're applying for grants to do transportation projects through PSRC. And to be a center, you have to plan the center to be an area where you are focusing growth within your city. There are some minimum thresholds that you have to meet in order to be eligible for a center. And in both of these areas, we've kind of gone through an exercise of showing how many residential units exist and how many jobs exist in each of these areas to prove that they are eligible, because ultimately the Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council has to recognize these centers in order for us to get credit for these areas and to potentially get a leg up on transportation funding. So there's not a whole lot of change proposed in either of these areas. It's really about the analysis of showing our work, but also tying together the recommendations of the Bethel Sedgwick sub-area plan, and really looking at the economic analysis that has been prepared. I'm not going to get too specific with you because this is being reviewed by the Planning Commission right now, and this is also a whole lot of information for you to go through. We were mostly just sharing this so that you can read the documents, and as the Land Use Committee, if you have comments or feedback, you can provide that to us. And so my hope is that each of you will take some time to flip through this. The two sub-area plans are structured very similarly, and in some cases the same language is used in both plans, but in other areas there's totally different data or information that is being conveyed. But take a look at both of these documents, and if you have questions or comments, please email Jim or I, and if we need to discuss this at our next Land Use Committee meeting, we can have it up again for discussion once you've had a chance to go through it. With that said, though, if you've had a chance to study the documents and you have questions, please feel free to start some discussion today.
So my question would be, both Nick and Jim, what specifically would you want us to look at? Because having just done a quick glance at it, it's a lot of information that we've seen before, you know, just in you know, additional or formatting, you know, changes. So is there anything specific that you want us to focus on?
Yeah, so I would, first of all, I think it's important to read the goals and policies for the plan. And then there is a exhibit in chapter 3 of each of the plans that is the opportunities, assets, and challenges. And there's some pretty specific information on there. And in some cases, there's new information. And one of the other things that we're drawing from as we review this document, and staff is still reviewing this document as well. We just received it about a week ago. But we're trying to make sure that the recommendations in our parks plan for where park facilities are needed is reflected in this plan as well. And so this plan is trying to further, we've identified in the parks plan the need for parks in the Bethel corridor area because there aren't city public parks in that area. We own a piece of property called Lundberg Park off of Harold, but it's not developed, and we have homeless issues there on occasion. And I don't know that that's the best location for a park facility within this area anyway. So really, I think thinking about what sorts of other improvements may be needed. Jim, do you recall whether this, I know we gave some initial feedback. Did the version that went to the land use committee include our feedback, or is this still the initial first draft?
This is the first draft.
Okay. So, one of the things that I think is probably totally unrealistic, but in one of these areas, there was a suggestion to have a branch library that would be in addition to our downtown library. And I don't think that's realistic. So there's
who suggested that?
Our consultant. So they're just, they're just throwing out ideas right now, and we've got to go out to the public with this and have a workshop on the sub area plan, and we have not done that yet. We've done our initial outreach for the sub area plan using the social pinpoint. We didn't get a whole lot of response from the community out here, but we're trying to take the information that we have received and formulate a plan, and then we're going to share that plan. But I think there are some ideas that were conveyed that just probably aren't viable and shouldn't be included in the plan. So both chapters include that opportunities map and assets and opportunities. We also, the consultant was suggesting some minor modifications to the center boundaries. And so we've provided feedback on those as well already. Just, a couple areas had some critical areas and wetlands where the consultant thought there might be development potential, and we're telling them, no, those either won't work, or yes, go ahead and modify the boundary slightly to make things a little bit more regular in terms of their shape.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
No,
Not-
thanks, Nick, for honing us in on what you want us to look at. I know a lot of it is existing conditions and routine language, but we can look at chapter 3.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know how much you remember of our work on the parks plan from 2021, but we did call for the need for park facilities in this area. We have not identified any specific potential sites, but I think as we're developing the sub area, we need to start thinking about that a little bit more. And we don't have any plans for parks. We don't own anything, but if an opportunity to buy something came up, and our impact fees are calculated to include the acquisition of properties, there may be a property or two that we would want to develop to provide amenities in this part of the city.
I would pause on that idea, because we think we've acquired enough nuts to build the community center. The Orchard Street Plaza is still $4 million. We got to fill a $4 million hole, and to go buy $1 million piece of property somewhere because the opportunity presented us could drastically set us back on the community center. Until we finish some of the stuff we're doing, I just caution us not to jump to other shiny objects.
And I'm not saying to go out and buy something right now. I'm saying identify on the map where you might like to buy something in the event it became available. Because the parks plan is a really high scale. It just said we need a park somewhere in the vicinity of Salmonberry and somewhere in the vicinity of Sedgwick. And now that we've defined these sub areas and we are expecting kind of development to be focused within these boundaries, we probably need to pick some location in the middle of the centers to provide that type of amenity.
What,
Yeah,
what
I
does
like
that
the,
park- what does it look like though? What is this? Is this sports court? Is it a?
The parks plan speaks to that. So it called for the types of amenities that we are deficient on in terms of not having enough per capita within the city, and also based on the survey that was done on the parks plan. Sports fields are definitely something that the parks plan said you need more of these types of
Well,
facilities.
we can't acquire
The,
in that area a soccer field, but we could acquire, tennis slash pickleball courts, basketball, what we're building at Gibbons. We
Yeah.
could drop that at the corner of Bethel and Salmonberry on that, property that's been there forever, although it's got a stream that needs to be restored.
Yeah, and maybe when we do our workshop on the sub area, maybe that's the question that we need to be asking is, when we prepared our parks plan, it said a park was needed in this region. Check the boxes for the types of amenities that you'd like to see, and let's see if we can get the community to tell us what they want so that we can figure out how much land is actually needed for something in this area if we were going to go down that road.
I like that the Sedgwick Bethel Centers has the trail along Blackjack Creek. That's a pretty low profile but active way of recreating and connections to subdivisions as well.
Any more discussion?
No, I just I'm a big fan of the amenities such as the pickleball courts, basketball courts, hardscapes. I think that and I could be totally wrong on this, but for me it just feels like it's cost effective. We're not providing, landscaping and irrigation and, replacing big toys, things like that. But we are providing areas for people of all ages to use. So if it's a possibility, I like that.
Yeah, and one of the things the parks plan calls for is like little skate dots, they call them, and it's not a full skate park, but it's a little like skateboard type feature where kids can hang out, and those are pretty low maintenance in terms of being concrete.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you go up to Jackson, you never see, there's never a lull unless it's pouring rain in that facility.
I don't know if it's a good fit in this area since that's right there to have something smaller scale to something that already exists.
Well, but you could walk to it. I think that's one of the main things if you live in this area.
Yeah, I think with the 3 subdivisions that were built and the new Blueberry apartments coming in and the potential Ramsey apartments, I think that block between Blueberry, Sedgwick, Ramsey, and Geiger is probably a prime site for something, because most of the people who live in that center would be able to walk there. The people over at the Pottery Apartments on the other side of Bethel would have a harder time getting to a facility. But I think you're going to have more kids where there are single family homes, and they might use that type of feature a little bit more.
All right, Gibbons Park remodel.
All right, I'm going to share my screen and bear with me for one moment. So we received just earlier today the final 60% plan set from our consultant Baumvelt, which is a landscape architect that we hired to do this design. Originally, we were going to do this in-house, but with the engineering staff that we've lost over the last few months, we ended up having to hire this out, and we are on track to bid this project later this summer. So the plan sheet, I think there's about 9 or 10 pages here. The first sheet is just the existing conditions, and really in this project, we're really rehabbing our existing facilities and then making both of the courts multi-purpose. The tennis courts will also be striped for pickleball with adjustable nets that can be lowered for pickleball. The basketball court will be fenced and will be striped for futsal with goals that can be stored within the fenced area and be placed underneath the basketball court. So the first sheet is just existing conditions. We move to the this is just our erosion control plan for the next 2 sheets. The demolition plan, everything that has a zigzag line through it or an X through it is a demolition. The tree protection triangles represent high visibility fencing to make sure that trees aren't damaged during construction. And you can see that mostly we're just taking down the existing fencing, the existing basketball hoops, the existing tennis nets, and then there's a retaining wall that we're taking out. Also, we're going to replace it with a seating wall. When you get into the design of the project, you can see that the tennis courts are striped for both uses. We're getting brand new fencing all the way around with new gates. There's also a gate that accesses directly to the south of the tennis courts. There's kind of an existing access here now, if I'm not mistaken. And so that does have to be replaced for accessibility reasons. We're also putting in some better gates for getting in and out of there with equipment whenever we would need to. You can also see that the pathway from the active club, the ADA for the active club access is way far to the north, and the pathway basically ties into the route that takes you to the ADA ramp along Klein Avenue. There's a seating wall here and then a new staircase that gets installed to take people down to the entrance to the tennis court and the futsal court. And that seating wall is like a two-step wall where with also an ADA pad where somebody can park a wheelchair if they're watching what's happening on the basketball and futsal court. So we're still working out the details of surfacing, but generally we have the layout pretty well dialed in.
Hey, Nick, my biggest question from what you've spoke to, what do these, you referred to a pickleball net that can be lowered. Most pickleball players bring their own net in these scenarios. And what's the maintenance aspect of these nets that, what do these things look like? I'm concerned about a maintenance nightmare.
I don't have that information handy, but it's something I can follow up on with our
if you would,
but apparently, yeah, there is a specific net that works for both that doesn't require adjustment, and it's being installed all over the place.
Okay, I'd just like to see that. I haven't seen one.
So anyway, the fencing is going to be like a dark, either green or black vinyl coated chain link fence. You know, there's not a whole lot to this design, as we're really living within our existing footprint. But I did want the committee to get a chance to see it. We're trying to get our comments back to the consultant by the end of the month here so that they can move into final design and hopefully get this thing bid for us later this summer.
So Nick, a couple questions. One is, are there any improvements that we need to make both for stormwater drainage that we, since it's been a period of time? And second one is, I think you alluded to ADA, the improvements that we need to make there besides that one pathway.
Well, we are designing the replaced facilities to be accessible. We're not fixing other deficiencies on the site as part of this effort, but to the extent that anything we change, we are making sure that it's ADA accessible. Because this is a replaced surface and resurfacing sports courts does not trigger the major land disturbing activity permit. We're under the square footage thresholds for minor land disturbing. We're not having to add detention facilities or anything like that. We're basically maintaining the status quo, which the manual allows up to a certain limit, and we're staying just below that limit.
Okay. Thanks.
Then I have a question, Nick.
Sure.
Where is the access for the handicap to get onto the courts?
Let me share Google Maps because it's not on the plan set.
Okay, I have a neighbor who's very active, and that's a huge concern of hers. So I just want to make sure that
yeah, let me share my screen.
Thank you.
So on Google Maps here, so keep in mind that the site, it's a bit of a drop off from the road down to the facility. And so the ADA access is from this ramp right here. So the ramp goes in and we're connecting our sidewalk from the point where the ADA access goes to the Active Club. And basically it cuts across diagonally across this lawn to where the sidewalk is.
Okay,
And
I
so-
saw stairs. I didn't know if there's also the ramp goes to the courts. So
Yeah, let me put the plans back up here.
perfect.
So
then also-
so you
Go
can
ahead.
see this is the diagonal pathway that connects
I'm
up with the
following you.
ADA access. And then we're adding a new staircase directly at the courts here. And then there's the existing staircase to Givens, which leads directly to the front door.
Perfect. And then piggybacking off of Mayor Rob, isn't Van Z an example of where you bring your own nets and you secure those for
Yeah,
pickleball players?
There's a club.
Yeah.
has
Yeah,
a Connex box, or a lock box there. You have to be a member of the club to have access to their nets. But
okay.
the people that I play with, we all have our own nets and we bring our net.
Yeah, I've seen at a couple of gyms that I have
Court
attended, they have poles in their courts and the poles have a crank on them to raise or lower the net.
Oh,
Definitely don't want those with the weather that we have. A different gym that I've attended, they actually have pins, and that works a lot better using pins versus a crank that raises and lowers the net. That's a maintenance nightmare for Rust. But anyhow,
I will
That's
send an
details.
email right now to our designer and ask them for the spec on the nets that are adjustable so that we know what we're getting, and I'll send it to the whole group.
Construction, 2025.
no, this summer.
We're
This
hoping
summer.
for this fall. We're just not sure we're going to be able to finish it before the rain starts. So if we get good weather, we might be able to finish it this year.
The surface that goes on the pickleball courts needs a certain temperature.
Right.
It's just whether or not we get enough good weather and September holds out for us to get that coating applied, for it to cure properly.
Yeah, much like Eric, I have a neighbor who's a huge pickleball fan, and I said there's 4 courts going in down at Givens. She said, "Please tell me when." It's
Yeah.
amazing how much it's picked up. That is our last item. I do have good of the order. I have something that I want to bring up.
Jay, I had one more question on.
Yeah,
this.
go ahead. I'm sorry, Scott. Didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, that's all right. When I was younger and I was playing tennis and on tennis teams and stuff, we had, and I saw this at University of Oregon too. We had tennis courts that also had a all-weather sheet of plywood mounted to the fence or to a wall so that you could play against that wall by yourself. And it had a painted line that was the same height as the net. And you could just sit there and, for hours play against yourself. And it didn't require any lines on the court because you could move as close to that line or as far away from that line as you wanted. I haven't seen that in any of the courts here, but I think that if we were to put something up like that, it might help people excel at their tennis skills.
Well, Scott, I played quite a bit of pickleball at Van Z, and I rarely see anybody playing tennis anymore.
Yeah. I've looked for a way to go and practice my tennis by myself. The closest I can find is East Port Orchard Elementary, where they've got those covered areas. But I don't know. If it's
Glenn has one
not a
too.
demand for tennis,
Yeah.
I guess I understand.
Scott, you're talking like table tennis, how they have
Yeah,
you can just
yeah,
play against like table tennis, same thing. Yeah, right.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, our high school had a concrete wall.
Yeah,
On that people used. I think pickleball is the wave of the future, gentlemen.
I think it is maybe for older people, but
Hey,
tennis
yo.
is still.
Hey,
Yeah.
Quite younger too. All right. Anything else on the good of the order on this one? I got one comment, good of the order. First of all, Mayor, thank you very much for giving me those slides today. I just kind of talked around. It was the First Lutheran men's group that I ended up talking with. They were very excited about what's happening in the city. They had 2 questions, and both of them go to Nick and Jim. The first question was, has anybody done a study of the essentially the fill and pilings that are down on Bay Street on the I would guess would be the north side? Just what are the issues with that and potential? I said, no, I would not want to be down there during an earthquake, but has anybody done a study about the
No.
viability? I didn't think so, but I don't remember anybody bringing that up. And
that would be a site-specific examination in any case, I think.
yeah,
The property owner would be doing.
yeah. The second one was Nick. Remember you shared with us the 2023 permitting data and what 2024 was looking like.
Mhm.
If I could get those spreadsheets from you, they were just interested on how permitting was going. Nothing as specific as much as the growth. And I talked about, the fact that population was exceeding our
So-
allocation. But again, they were very positive what's happening in the city. They asked questions about Bethel and more of the fact that our mayor, it's more of like, they understand that it takes time and, like all of us say, it can't happen soon enough, and a lot of it has to do with funding, et cetera. But they were a very supportive group. So I can pass that information on. If you could just send me those, I'd appreciate it.
So the report that I gave summarized what we provided to the Office of Financial Management on our 2023 activity.
Right.
And then separately, I had the presentation of all the development projects.
Right.
That had like pictures of what's being developed where.
Right.
I don't think the report to OFM is probably interesting because it's a lot of just like permit numbers, addresses.
No, I was just looking for something general, like you shared before, like how many single family houses, how many apartment units, multifamily had gone up.
Yeah,
If it
let's
would've known, I have that, and it was part of my talking points when I give that presentation.
Okay.
So I have it written down in my office.
Okay. If
if
I
you
can get
can
it from
forward
you at
that-
some point.
yeah,
I'll just
please
get it from the
please.
mayor.
Sounds great. I've got a deadline on Friday that I'm.
No, I'll just
We
get
got
it from
work all night
you.
tonight.
They're in no
It's-
hurry. It's not like it was, on that, but yeah, very
Off the
positive.
top of my
very
head,
supportive.
Jay, it's like 300 and change on the single family, and
Yeah.
it's 600 and something on the multifamily.
Yep. Okay. That's it for me. Eric or Scott, anything?
No,
Okay.
I'm good.
Hey.
Thank you.
Thank you all
Bye,
very
everybody.
much. And
Take care.
more information to follow. And Nick and Jim, I know you're busy, so back to the grindstone.
Appreciate
Thanks.
all the hard work, guys. Thank you so much.
yeah,
Bye.
yeah.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah, see you.
But